right, everybody, welcome to the Event Professionals Network meetup. We have a special guest here as well as a new host, co-host. Jess, I'm going to have you be our co-host today as well. And then we have Huong, who's our special guest, who will introduce herself in just a minute. But a brief overview about what the Event Professionals Network is. It is a free resource for anybody that's in the event industry, event marketing, trade shows, user conferences, whatever you're in. If you're doing the work, this is the network for you. It was started in 2020 when COVID hit as a way for us to connect, learn, and grow together. So we hope that you, if you're not in the group, that you join us. So Jess, do you want to tee us up with what this particular meetup is, and then we'll do introductions.
Yeah, absolutely. So this week we're really just diving into budgets. I think as Hong put it in her post, like definitely not the sexiest thing that anyone wants to talk about. But definitely one of the most challenging things that we deal with, no matter what sort of type of event planner you are. I mean, everything hinges on a budget. So I think, I'd really, love to dive in, hear more about Shiloh Events. Where did it come from? What's inspired you, Hong? And let's dive into where you came from and what your background is. Let us know.
I certainly didn't choose events because I love budgets. Don't get that right. I mean, wrong, but I don't like budgets. However, it is literally the key to opening up the doors to everything that we do, right? We have to go in and get the money that we want. But going back to Shiloh, it's a really cool word, actually. It's a Hebrew word that means peace, essentially a place of peace. And when I was at NASA, I was experiencing so much stress and anxiety, like doing these events, like product launches, shuttle launches, outreach, community outreach, getting together and like going to these different museums and doing events with the media as well. I was getting a lot of stress. I mentioned earlier because of my boss, but also because it's a stressful industry. And so when I started Shiloh, I was like, well, what am I going to do that's going to be different, right? And so we picked the name that meant a place of peace. And the goal is when clients work with us and when people work with us, they experience peace instead of anxiety. Actually one of my team member, she called me up, I think a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, I'm not good at budgets. And she straight up told me, she's like, I know I know I'm a senior planner, but I don't like numbers and I don't like finance and I'm not good at budget. And in my mind, I'm like, well, I hired you so that you can be a project manager. And part of the responsibility is to do budget. And so part of my thinking as a boss, I was like, well, you're not really doing your job then, right? Then you shouldn't be a senior lead owning a program. But then I took a step back and I'm like, you know what? Actually, the wise thing to acknowledge is that she is really good at leading her program in terms of client communications, overseeing all the different other elements that we have to oversee when it comes to like expo, food and beverage, hotel room. She's very meticulous. She's very articulate as well, and the clients love her. But the one thing that she's weak at is numbers. So instead of punishing her for not being good at numbers, I was like, all right, let me actually assign another team member to allocate maybe 5 hours of their week to run your numbers for you. Basically going into Smartsheet, going into Airtable, going into all of these, being CC'd on emails and reviewing these numbers and entering them into a budget and helping her do the analysis so that she would be equipped with that information so she can go into those meetings and present with a clear head instead of being like combobulated with all these like trying to figure out what the calculations are. And some people, they're not good at that. And so the goal is, going back, is to deliver not only peace to my clients, but also peace to the people working with me, that when they're, in this team, they know that they can be vulnerable. They know that they can trust us to take care of them when they're weak. And that's what I hope to bring to the event industry with our boutique agency. Is peace.
I love that. Okay, so you're going to laugh because I know it's my turn to intro next. So one of our company values is glimmer. And I know that's weird because it's like kind of sparkle, but that's what we try to bring too, is we try to bring that layer of calmness, joy, sparkle, like that, because events, like you said, are very, very stressful. So Gregory Event Services seeks to do the exact same thing. We actually redid our values, which will roll out soon on LinkedIn and spend more time on that. But I think you and I have a very similar mission, and really just to help people and provide a safe environment for people to be upfront. Like, you aren't going to be good at everything. You haven't done everything, in your career, and that's why we're here, so that
Yeah.
we can help each other.
And
All right. So for our very first question or like segment, we're going to go through budgeting fundamentals and the core principles of budgeting. What are the core principles that you focus on when you're creating a budget for an event?
yeah, the number one thing I keep in mind is it's never going to be accurate. You have to do it's never going to be accurate. So here's what I do. I'll just give you an example. I was on a call with a prospect the other day. It's a startup company. He is kind of green, in the industry, so he doesn't know the numbers. And he was planning a in-person event plus a hybrid component for 50 people in New York. And I asked him what his budget was. You guys should probably know it's probably at least like 70K. He told me it was his budget was 6K. And I was like, my friend, like, my friend, I want you to know, I don't want to sticker shock you, but I have to tell you, it's going to be more than that. So, number one thing is ripping the band-aid off, right? Knowing like it's okay to come out and say it's going to cost this much. When I started as a young leader, I was very young when I started this agency. I was like 26 years old, and I didn't have any agency experience. So when I met with companies like Twitter and Facebook, and that was the people that was coming through my door at the time, I was scared to tell them the real number, and I lowballed myself. And a lot of vendors probably do that with you when you're sourcing because they want the job. But the responsibility of us is that when we know it's not going to cost that much, it's not, it's not the accurate number of what they tell you. It's okay to speak that. So my policy number one is honesty, is being upfront with what it's going to cost and how that is going to translate in reality. So I say, low, medium, and high. If you and obviously like I get to like their goals and their objectives and the vision that they want to do. So I try to align with what they have in their mind as like what the event really looks like in here versus what it looks like in my mind, because it can be very, very different. So number one is assessing the goals and the vision and the objectives of the event. Number two is being honest, right? Being upfront and transparent what that number is going to cost. And then three is backing it up with either actual proposal or actual photos of what it looks like. I always share photos when I share numbers. Like for an example, if I'm going to give an AV number of like $500,000, I share with them that this includes an LED screen, a backdrop, intelligent lighting. It includes a camera crew. It includes 3 days of setup, 6 breakouts. It includes, rehearsal. It includes live stream. So listing every single element that is in there. And I know that it's easy for us to want to take shortcuts and just get this number approved. And like the process of doing a budget analysis is like really cumbersome and annoying. But if you do that work upfront, you not only equip your stakeholders and like the point of contact that you're working with, you're also speaking directly to the executives to these deck that like, if you want to create the type of event that you want to have, you got to fork up the money, right? So showing literally every single item and being upfront as much as you can, and then having scenarios where if this is not the number that you want to that you're able to invest into, here are some other options that are lower tiered and mid tier, and here are some extra costs that you didn't even think of, right? So like for an example, this happens all the time when we're on site and they want to add a camera. Those are some hidden costs that are not like you don't think of, right? That are surprised. So you basically plan ahead and anticipate some of the things that that's going to be required that they haven't even thought of yet. And there are some hidden costs that are there in contracts as well. So make sure you ask for that upfront. Like I always ask, what are some things that I haven't thought about yet with my vendors, especially with AV vendors, tech companies, like, your event tech for virtual platforms or networking. Some of the hidden costs that are, for me, that always come up is support hours. You never think of that when you are contracting the tech, is the support hours you might need on site, pre-event as well, to set everything up. Union fees, somebody said that, Mike. I mean, that is horrendous. Like the unit fee is like 30% of your AV bill. And so I do this. I take the base number and I also buffer. I buffer at least 20 to 30%. And I know that that is, you know, going to be hard to get it passed. But I'm telling you, I've done it the lowball way, and it always end up terribly. It always end up me groveling for more money versus me going higher, and then they get sticker shock, and then I end up, you know, being honest, and I buffer that you know, I buffer the numbers and I give them options, and I get like maybe at least medium tier, and I have some wiggle room, and I've already like laid it all out.
Yeah. I think too, the key is understanding where your budget dollars are hitting within the organization. So knowing up front, okay, we're going to send 100 staff or even 20 or even 5 staff. Is that T&E coming out of your event budget? Is it coming out of the department budget? Same for things like swag. Swag can be out of this world expensive. You know, it can, you know, what budget is that hitting out of? Is there a swag budget? So sometimes your events team, or if you're new in an organization, you might not be familiar where those budget items are coming out of. So it's helpful to know that. And then, like you said, hidden costs. So when I put a hidden cost line in, or a budget buffer line, we also like to say, okay, what could this be? It could be an additional camera. It could be like one time I was in San Francisco and I had to pull internet line from down the street down to the basement of the Marriott in San Francisco, and it would cost $10,000. No one told me that. Right? It's like now we're spending, I don't even want to tell you how much that internet bill was, but it was a lot. But adding 10K on that, those types of things pop up a lot. So those contingency budgets are vital, and your executives will be very tempted to pull money out of that. So saying what that might be, and if you need help understanding what those might be, just Slack us and we'll throw some stuff at you. But I love that, the goals first. And even like, so what do you do? So there's things called tier 1 and tier 2 cities, right? And even within like the Bay Area, if you choose downtown San Francisco versus Santa Clara or San Jose, you can still kind of reach your target audience, but the pricing differences
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. Carrie, you asked, do you buffer all line items and add a contingency? Yes, I buffer the majority of line items, not all, because if you buffer all, then it reduces the credibility of that buffer. Do you know what I mean? So like you want to try to be like, for an example, with food and beverage, the way that you buffer is, you know, like if you estimate 500 people to be there, I always try to do like 550, just a little more, just at least within the line item, I have that buffer. And or like with AV, like, you know, what Lisa was saying about having that contingency within the line item. And then I have a contingency at the very bottom as well. Because there are moments, guys, when I go in and I present this to the finance department, and oftentimes as an agency, I don't work with the clients directly to get approval. They actually hand me off to their CFO and they have me fight their battles for them. Like they have me like, you know, sit with their CRO and like justify these numbers. And these CROs, they will call me out. They'll be like, why are you buffering so much? You know, so I don't want you guys to buffer too much and then it end up, you know, getting bit in the, you know, in the ass, but I think that's the term. But yeah, so try to try to be very strategic of the line item that you do buffer in. And then for me, the strategy is having a contingency bucket that's not allocated to any line item, because what happens is sometimes executives, especially the finance department and the CFO, they'll be like, well, if you buffer for giveaway and you don't use that, I'm sorry, you can't reallocate that money. You don't want to get stuck in that situation either, you know? Yeah, that has happened. And then Tracy, how many folks here have T&E come out of their event budget? Yeah, that has happened with me. And which is interesting that it comes out of T&E comes out of my event. But it's justifiable, to be honest with you. I do sometimes agree that if the team is traveling to a city for that specific event, that it should come out of that event. So I do see it both ways.
I kind of think you have to look at it from both perspectives, like, right? Like you have to see what the differences are from you. Maybe I don't want it in my budget, but I do want to know how much it costs to travel the team, because I think so many times there's a great reason for every person to be there, but sometimes there's a ton you can save on sending team members if you can find the right people to go, who can, wear multiple hats. So I think you have to see both for the perspective, basically.
Well, and you're ultimately responsible, right, for the success of the event. And then the company ultimately is investing in events. So if they see that we are, even though we're not involved in that T&E, because sales might decide to send 20 people at the last minute, it does hit the bottom line for the company. And so then they're like, oh, well, the ROI wasn't as good. Well, you sent another 20 salespeople and we didn't need them there. And they wanted all travel to Amsterdam, which was great fun, but the ROI wasn't there. So especially in 2024 and 2025, I think ask that question, like Jess said, both, whether it hits your budget or not. And then what control do you have? And does your team have? Can you say no?
Yeah, it depends on the company too, and the event and the purpose of it. So like SKOs, we split it up. So the events team is on the events budget, but the sales team that are coming in for the SKO is on the sales budget, and the marketing is on the marketing budget. So it takes a little bit of admin work on the back end to parse that out. And I had to like give a report to the finance department of like who traveled and from what department. But it certainly, there's a way to parse that up as well. Yeah.
Yep. So do you do this too, where you say, okay, we do a drop down that's like, which department is it coming from? And then when is the money going out? So finance always wants to know what the total budget is, but when is the money going out so they can plan for it quarterly, because they don't understand sometimes we have to pay our money earlier, but it still might hit fiscally in Q3. So
Right.
how do you deal with managing and communicating with finance on, when
Yeah.
you're spending a lot of money
Yeah. So
getting
I create a chart where I have the list of event elements and then the total amount of that was approved. And then I put in like I break it up into phases of the planning process of how much money is owed when, and like in what, obviously in what phase and when. And then I break it up by the phase percentage. So let me just share with you an example. And it's very simple. And it's like literally just a slide with a table that shows percentage of when things are due. And that's how I bill them up front. So here, let me share this. Right. So funding required by phases, percentage of payment, the amount, the month that it's due, and the event elements are the same across 3 phases, right? Yeah. So then you basically, show them how much is owed in different phase so that they know how much money to like allocate ahead of time.
That's glorious. Keep that up for a second so people can see.
Of course.
Yep. I think the phases are key too. So I don't know if this ever happens to you, but we're like, okay, the phase 1, we're estimating all this stuff. But then in phase 2, some of those leftover funds go to different things that were on your initial budget. So you're like, good thing we padded all this stuff because they added 50% more items and we need to take that money and push it here. And then for phase 3, that's sort of the final, like, okay, this is what's hitting. This is what we think is going to actually happen.
And then you have it
Is,
month 2. And then this is what you use to negotiate with your contracts, your hotel and your vendors. So, and then you tell them, when is it due? Is it due monthly or is it due, by a specific date? And then we have a payment tracker. We create a payment tracker that showcases like, I can show you an example of what we do, but it showcases like all the vendors that need to get paid, how much are the deposits and when it's due and how it's being paid, and then links to like invoices. Do you guys do that as well? Yeah, let me show you.
Muted, Lisa.
I'll share ours in just a second.
So it, it has the company name, the contact of who's managing that account, the contract, links to the contract, links to the invoices, the payment, terms, percentage of what's due, 50%, 100%, amount that's due, due date, amount paid, date paid, amount that's still owed, payment type, full contract amount, receipt, and then W-9s.
Yeah.
So this is just one way that we track the payment, but we have multiple templates that we create for different finances, because every finance for some reason is so different. There's so many payment systems that they use, bill.com, Coupa, and like procurement systems, right? And so you have to like adopt to them. But this is just one way that we track the payments.
Yep, I'll show ours too. We have something very similar, so it kind of just depends on, like you said, on the client. But we have the exact same thing. So we have all of our clients or vendors on the left. We have what the vendor is for, all the contact information, who the internal owner is, so we can figure out like potentially what budget, the W-9s, the contract status, all the deposit information, all the invoice information, and then yeah, so it's very, very similar. And then
Right.
on the budget, we do the different rounds.
Mm,
So all the estimates via the different rounds as well.
yeah.
And then the different notes, we track every single note that we put in there so the client can keep track. So
Yeah.
your finance. So for example, if on 7/8, you're like, this is what I updated it. When you go in there on 9/1 and update it, do not delete your other comment, because you want to see, and who knows, like next year, it might not be you running that event. It might be somebody else. So
Ah,
they're going to want to see, hey, the PR budget now got sucked out of we thought PR had their own budget, and now it turns out they didn't. So we had to give another 30K from our budget. So that's why that line item went away. So next year they can be like, we actually do need that line item, and PR does need a budget for that 30K, right? So don't delete your notes as you go through, and keep it very tidy. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And then obviously align with the different team members and the stakeholders. Because even though, you've negotiated 50% upfront, sometimes clients don't want to pay that, right? So we got to make sure that they are in agreement with this payment schedule.
Yeah. And knowing that upfront is helpful too. So then when you're going to the vendors, you can kind of say, okay, this 100% is not going to work. Like AV always wants a lot of money up front. Sorry, AV. I'm gonna always give it to you. But it's helpful for them because they have to pay their crew, right? Like everybody's got to figure out the finances. So it all can't go at the last minute. And sometimes that's what clients or teams want, because they have to wait for the revenue. So how do you handle that if people are waiting for revenue, like sponsorship dollars and registration, and the client hasn't saved all that money? They don't have that money yet in pocket because registrations haven't come in. They typically come in super late. And how do you guys usually handle that?
Yeah, so obviously there still needs to be some advance funding that's going to be required. So we give them an idea of what, like for an example, I guess the non-negotiable would be the hotel deposit. That's a non-negotiable. Everything else is negotiable. Everything else you could push out, like you said, AV, catering. The event tech probably is non-negotiable. They usually require 50% upfront so that you can access their platform. So my suggestion is identify the ones that are like an absolute required to pay upfront a certain, and then negotiate the percentage down. And then push everything out as much as you can in the final phases of planning. And then when you're doing the percentage of breakdown, do 10%, 20, 30, do a smaller percentage deposit upfront, and then the rest leading up to the show. And then obviously post show, never ever pay anything 100% upfront, no matter who it is. I know some hotels do require that you pay 100% of their bills upfront. And yes, those are non-negotiable oftentimes, but if you can fight it, do so. I fight it all the time. And sometimes I win, sometimes I don't, but I'm like, I'm not going to pay you 100% of these rooms right away, because what if there's cancellations or the F&B? But I sometimes lose that battle and I have to do pay. And then it sucks having to chase them down for that money back, right? And then the other thing is too, sometimes hotels do buffer in like some kind of 25% contingency that you have to pay them, even though you're not going to use it. Make sure you read the fine print so that you don't pay that money. Yeah, I've gotten caught in that. I'm like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to pay you 25% of money that I'm not even going to leverage. So that's how I combat it, is identify the non-negotiables and then try to figure out a way to like negotiate within that. And then push everything out towards the event or after and never pay anything upfront.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while since we've done any kind of webinar or training on contracts, but Jess, we should do that at some point. How to negotiate a contract, how to negotiate and what you can negotiate for trade shows, user conferences. What's the difference? Because contracting for the various different events, various types of vendors, the countries, everything is just a little bit different, and helping your leadership team know why the difference is, and that is important. So they might, like Europe, we just did a search there and we had a big event and they're like, don't worry about the money, we'll get it later. We're like, what? Like, okay. And then in the US, everybody's like, yep, we want all the money now. And then they're all asking for that contingency. One thing we've been doing this year that's a little bit different is, as we search for locations, we're actually doing more upfront on what the taxes are, what the service charge are, all that, so that we can even just say, okay, we're actually not going to go to this city because of the taxes. We're not going to go to this venue. We're not even going to look at it because the service charge is so high, right? Because those extra fees really, really add up. Have you guys been experiencing that this year?
Yeah. I love what Carolyn said, that she requests an audit of charges. So we request pro forma bills like the minute that we sign the contract, is I want to understand how much, the all-in cost is going to be, so that I add that to the budget. So when you do the budget, like I said, always buffer 1.2, 1.3. So like basically 20 to 30% of addition to account for those taxes. Because you just, again, you never know, like there's a variation between 22% to 24%, sometimes even 27%. But, to be honest, our clients don't really make the decision based on the tax percentage. They make the decision based on, I guess, like, the appeal and where they want to go. The room rate has a lot to do with it as well. That room rate, the difference between $5 to $10 is a huge factor. And then the other thing that I don't know if you guys do this, is a rebate or a commission. Obviously, I had a horror story where, I don't know if I told you, but a multi-billion-dollar company that I was working with as a client of ours, if I mention the name, you would totally know it. I'm not going to say it, but they asked me for my commission, and it was $100,000 of commission from a Las Vegas hotel, and it broke my heart. I was like, you're really going to ask me to give you my hotel commission? You've been my client for 8 years. And, I know it was so sad. Like I literally cried after that call. But she was struggling in her new role. She just got promoted to a director of events. I actually helped her get that job because I knew some of the people that were hiring and I had put in a good word. And anyways, she had grown up in that company. So did I. And she was, she made a plea with me, like, we're cutting our budgets tight. And she said, one of the ways that I can like save money is by asking you for that commission. And it was a lot to ask, Carolyn. And I was like, what if I gave you half? And and this is where the secondary shady shit came in. She was like, well, if I gave you, so she's like, I kind of want 100%. And I was like, I'll give you half if you give me the other business that you're doing as well, the other event that's like multi-million-dollar. And she's like, let me pitch it to my team. We pitched it. And she's like, okay, you're getting the business. I was like, all right, I'll give you half. A week later, she comes back and said, oh, the incumbent agency bid on it. And unfortunately, your number leaked and they matched your number. So you didn't end up getting the job. Yeah, they matched your number. You didn't end up getting a job, but can I still have the 50% commission? I was like, but I didn't get the job. So how am I going to do? So then in the end, I was like, well, you know what? Actually, now I'm back at 100. Anyways, we went back and forth and she really strong armed me. And because I'm a giver, we're all givers, right, guys? When you're in the events industry, you're a giver, you're hospitality driven, you care about your clients. That's why we're in this like industry in the first place. So in the end, please don't hate me for this, but I was like, you know what? You can have all of it. I just gave the 100% to her. It was 100K of revenue that could have sustained somebody's salary, could have sustained somebody's health benefits and 401k. And I just ended up giving away because at the end of the day, ladies, my peace is not worth the fight. I'm not going to like deal with legal. I don't want to deal with losing what for me, what I perceived was a friend in her. And I, so I ended up giving it away. And yeah. So anyways, commission is going to help your budget, but don't take it from agency. But one of the ways too is rebate. Food rebate is important. But I digress, but that was an interesting story of how a client tried to make their budgets work. Right. But we got to understand it from their point of view. They could get fired. They're under a lot of pressure as well. So that's where we have to have compassion, not only for our own side of the business, but for them.
Yeah. Well, Michelle Obama often goes through my head when my mom actually reminds me of this. We go high,
Yeah.
and sometimes go low. And yes, we get it. There's a lot of factors, but we go high. So
Yeah.
good on you. Not sure if it was the right decision or not, but for your heart, I know it was.
Yeah. And it's
That's what's
the
most important.
the heart.
For your,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Been there.
And vendors too,
Sometimes
right?
we just, sometimes I don't even, I'm like, because technically we're not supposed to do that. So we can get in trouble, y'all, with
Yeah.
the vendors if we do it. So it's more of a legal thing on lots of sites.
Right. And the vendors too, right? When we negotiate with them, we put them in a really hard place. So I try not to nickel and dime our vendors either. I try to really fight for that money for the
Yeah.
vendors.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about vendor relationships. So I know you guys have buddies in the industry and we have buddies in the industry, and we get better service when we give budgets to, our friendlies, right? Um, and then they take care of your people more. So if you can, as you're spending your money, try to coach your team to find your friendlies, right? Find those vendors that you trust the most. That'll help your budget. That way, if you get into a budget pinch and you're like, eeks, I really need this backdrop wall, but it's going to cost $5,000. What can you do? Please, can you help me? Like I just did with my friend at Fern. And he said, Lisa, don't worry about it. I got you. Don't worry about it. And so you need your friendlies. You need those people that are going to have your back.
Yeah. There are
And
so many where I have to ask my vendor to to I guess cut some stuff in terms of cost to save the client's butt. But I make it up on the other end though. I do give them the business for other clients. And I do make it up by trying to buffer over there as well. So it's just knowing, where certain things and how you can balance it out.
Yep. Yep. But if you don't have your network of trusted vendors, use the Event Professionals Network. We'll let you know kind of who to use and when and for what and all that stuff based on country and region and all that stuff. So let us know, because trusted vendors are equal successful budgets.
I have a question for you though, Lisa. Do you share the vendor bills directly with the clients for transparency? Okay, very good.
Yep. One of our company values is transparency, and we do not mark up anything. And if we do, they know about it.
Yeah.
So that's something very different that we do that most agencies do not. Most agencies do mark it up. We do not. And that is because that's the type of event agency I wanted to hire but couldn't find. So I created my own secret agency to be able to provide that, right? That's, I come to work every day just wanting to help people and help the community. And so it's just a little bit different. My mind isn't, which probably it should be more focused on money. But that's my secondary.
Yeah. A lot of our vendors don't really break down the numbers. So we have to like go back multiple times to get the breakdowns of those numbers. Especially Freeman, like their furniture, $350 for a chair. Why is that three? And so I have to like really push for a breakdown of why does it cost $350 for a spar stool or like whatever, right? And they don't have that breakdown. And so when my clients ask me, I don't, I say, well, that's just how they charge with the markup. But it, like, when vendors don't break it down, it puts us in a bad situation too. So try to get that breakdown as much as possible. And I know it's a nuisance, but like adding it to your budget, literally line by line, chair number one, 350 times one. This concludes whatever. Yeah. So we're very detailed oriented in that breakdown of budgets.
My
Yeah,
main
we've done like,
tactic
oh, go
is-
ahead, Jess.
I was just gonna say my main tactic is just to be like ridiculously overly nice, even though I know I'm being a nuisance. I'm totally being a nuisance. But I'm like, "But thank you so much for every single thing that you do. You're an amazing human." Like I like go way over the top, even though I'm just trying to give you money ultimately. So please do what I ask. But yeah, that's a
Yeah.
That is a superpower though. So as you're planning a budget, breathe. If a vendor is not doing what you want them to do, just breathe through it, right? Kindness always usually equals savings on money.
Yeah.
And direct communication. Hey, this is what I need. Get it documented, send the email, and then when they try to come back to ask for more money, you're like, nope, this is what we agreed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had one AV team that was like, this includes rehearsals and all this stuff. And then on site, I said, hey, we're going to go long on our rehearsals. What are the additional costs? And he said, oh, it might be about $5,000. I'm like, great. That's what I'm holding you. $5,000. Sent him an email. Right. He came back afterwards and was like, oh, I had to keep my entire crew. And the bill was $35,000 more. And I said, nope, here you go. And you know what? He had to fall on that sword.
Ooh.
So, lesson learned for him and for all y'all, document in writing. This is what you said. This is what we're sticking to, and that will save you, right?
Joanne,
All right.
to
Oh, go
me.
ahead.
You said if you don't mark up vendor services, do you just add your margin to the bottom line like an agency fee? And the answer is yes. Yeah. We add it. And our agency fee are also broken down by scope, Joanna. So we have like list of event elements that we would provide services for, and it's line by line, and that's how we, I guess, make our money at the end of the day. Yeah. And then there are some agencies, I do know of them, that what they do is they sell an event as a package, right? So they'll say, I'll do this incentive program for $1 million. And the agreement is that they don't get any invoices. And when they do, it's like, white labeled. And so, for an example, event company A would send you a bill for the hotel, but it would be super generic and super vague. And you never know what their true markup is. So you can sell it by the event, you can sell it by agency fee. And then there are some agencies that just says, whatever you spend, I mark up 20%. But when you do that, honestly, it's very economically unsustainable, both on the high end and the low end. So I don't recommend, hiring an agency based on the percentage of cost.
100%. Yeah, I was just going to say that. It's like, oh, well, you're going to spend $1 million, then we automatically get 10%. No.
Exactly. No, it doesn't work. Yeah. So don't hire. Yeah. I would say the best agency that you would hire is one that charges you by the agency fee for scope.
Yeah. It was a very specific line item of exactly what you're getting with that. We did have some questions in here. Everybody has small to medium budgets. Not very many people have large budgets right now, which is understandable. How do you make every dollar count? And showing this in your post reporting. So we don't always do the post reporting. Keep that in mind.
You don't. Okay.
But making every dollar count and being like, how does that tie to the ROI?
Yeah, so we do post-event debriefs that showcase, for an example, every element and photos of what was executed on site. So if it's like an expo, we'd have the booth photos and the furniture that went with it. And then we showed the ROI of how many people visit that booth, what was the sponsorship cost of that, and then the profit of the sponsorship. So if the sponsorship was $10,000, how much did it cost for us to execute the booth and what the bottom line is? So we break it down element by element. And then for food, we obviously do a consumption report of how many people ate and what was the waste, so that they understand like where the overages was. And we do share some of the negative things too, right? Like things that we overspent. For an example, swag is always an overspent items. There's always leftover in some way, shape, or form. And well, if it's an internal, right, and then they ship it back to their office. And so finding ways to showcase how certain things can be reused as well. Those swag can be reused for future trade shows. And these photos can be reused for future marketing, like photography, for an example. How do you showcase ROI on photography? This can be used for social media, repurposing content for blogs, and sizzle reel, promotional reels. So what we do is in our deck, our analysis deck, we have the revenue analysis of registration count, the money that came in, and then the sponsorship. And then we do a bottom line, and that bottom line then is broken down to each element and to showcase with photos and actual reports as well.
Yep. And when you're working with the marketing team, really going through and saying, okay, what do we need for next year's event? So you're not just planning for this year and getting photos and all that stuff for this year. You're looking at next year and the year after. Can you get a promo reel? Can you use the awesome session that was about XYZ, create a blog or customer testimonials or whatever? How are you layering and peppering that in for your future quarter? So, maybe you need to assign someone for marketing to every single session that you're in. Or maybe they just need to be writing down like, hey, I want to take this snippet and move it here. Another thing that people don't anticipate and don't use is that, yes, we are marketing events. And this is one thing I always battled when I was internal. But what we do can benefit the entire business: hiring, sales development and training, customer success. So that ROI, guys, really think outside the box, because if you're just throwing a user conference, you're just going to a trade show. Yes, I know your marketing CMO only wants you to focus on that, but in my opinion, the more people we care about, and if you care about the business, you are going to bring the business more valuable, and then you're going to have higher tangible results, right? That you can document. We're not just in it for one department. You should be in it to win it for the entire company, and not just for that quarter, but for the next quarters. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I love is, oh, go ahead.
I just
Oh,
want
I
to
was
make
trying
sure
to guys to make. Oh no, go ahead, Jess.
I want to make sure we're staying on time. So I just wanted to call out that, there's only 8 minutes left. So Lisa, maybe if you wanted to go into kind of the last couple of questions or points, and then we could jump into if there's any questions from the group.
Yep, I'm going through the biggest challenges in the doc, all the stuff that they filled out. But if there's questions, please drop them in the chat. That would
There
be
was
great.
one that popped in just a second ago. From an RFP perspective, what are your top 3 strategies to win the bid?
From an agency perspective, like if as an agency, how do we win the bid? Is that the question, Jude? Or okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Go ahead, Lisa, you go first.
Oh, okay. So winning the bid, this is how we go in. We go in assuming that we've already won. So we start working for the client immediately, not when we win. So we're already doing stuff. And that's just the way I run my business. So even if we don't win it, fine, we've already provided value. And you know what usually happens is if you don't win it, they come back, friends. They always come back because you already provided that value and they already know what you're getting, even though the pricing might not align or there might be something else off. They'll go choose someone else. And most of the time they do come back, whether it's a year or whatever. So keep that in mind. So just because you don't win it now doesn't mean that you
Well,
won't.
and anyone you meet in that room, I think this is what's been really interesting to me is to see those relationships that you create. And then yeah, sure, maybe they weren't the lead at that point, but now they're the lead at this company because they have grown up and now, but they know you still. And so I think those relationships, and again, providing that value, it doesn't matter who sees it, because then that can spread, right? I think that's been really interesting for me to learn about.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And then pricing wise, know what your competitors are charging. That's important, but know what your business expenses are, right? Like I run a very lean business on purpose. And some agencies don't on purpose. So you have to figure out what your expenses are, how you want to run your business, and then bid it in that way and show your key differentiators, right? So if you're a differentiator and you're going against two other agencies that are similar, you need to know and research what agencies you're going across. That might mean you might be able to charge more money. It might mean you have to bring it down. So what do you do, Hong, as far as business development and winning?
Yeah. I agree with everything that you said. Providing value is important. I would caution, I've done the work too, and I think that's a great approach, Lisa. I would caution though not to do too much, because you would end up expending yourself more than you are focusing on your current clients. And that has happened for us, right? Like, for us, the I don't know how many agencies we have in this call. And I want to say I feel you, and I feel the pain that you're going through with getting the business. But the mistake that I made when I started out is trying to get so many new business that I lose sight of my current business. And as a boutique agency, we don't want to allocate too much attention trying to get more and more and more, and not focus on the quality that we have with our current one. So well, we do the work upfront, but the amount of work that we do is very limited to just building out your budget. We may source your venue and that's it. And we may do space allocation, but at some point, who's it? Jude, ask for an engagement letter to say, I can do more work for you if there's the intention. And Freeman did this to me a while ago when I asked them to do a ton of work. They sent me an engagement letter, so I can send you an example if you want. But I want you to commit to at least engaging with me at some point. And then the other thing I do is that has been helpful with me is adding photos and adding examples of what I've done to everything that I propose. So if I'm proposing an expo hall, if I'm proposing signage plan, if I'm proposing, AV, I always give them photos of your work. So that it's not just the numbers, or it's not just text. And then the other thing too is add your team members to the sales call, so that they're not just talking to you, but they're talking to the ops team. And there's already a relationship and a trust that they can build with your ops team. So whoever is going to work on this program, add them to the sales call and have them contribute to the ideation and the brainstorming. Because at the end of the day, you're not selling, the number, you're selling your team, you're selling people, right? It's the people that's doing the work and the relationship that's going to be built.
Yeah. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we could talk about this topic or just talk about anything for a very long time. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you donating your time and your knowledge and your heart. And we can definitely see that the passion for helping others win and, thrive is just flowing right out of you. So we appreciate that. And thank you everyone for joining. We know you are all busy, especially right now. If there's future topics that you'd like us to cover, please let us know. I think contracts are probably one of them. And then for our upcoming webinar or meetup in September, we're just going to do a reboot. I know you probably saw, but we're just going to do yoga, breathing, just so when you jump off of that call, you feel centered and ready to go into your fall. And then we'll do it again if we need to. Thanks, everyone. Hong, you want to say some final closing words?
Yeah, I just want to say, it's okay to fall sometimes and to lose. I've lost a ton of bids and I also won some. And at the end of the day, it's not perfection or actually the number, it's journey, and it's the people that you work with. And like, we all have our families to go to, but I know it's our livelihood. So hang in there. I know budgets are tight and there's turnovers, but it ebbs and it flows. And it's just ride with it, ride the wave and enjoy it. That's it.
And sometimes the loss equals a greater win down the road.
Exactly.
right?
Yeah,
So a loss isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just means it's not for now.
it's not for now. Exactly. Yeah.
Yay. All right. Thanks, everybody. We
Thank
appreciate you.
you.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. Bye, everybody.